In the latter half of the 20th century, the international recognition of engineering degrees and qualifications became an issue much like interstate and interprovincial recognition had been in America and Canada earlier in the century. Since then, there have been increasing efforts to promote international recognition of engineering credentials. Throughout the 20th century, industrialized nations remain the centers of technological and product development. But as the century progressed, developing nations sought to establish their own manufacturing base using existing technologies and import substitution policies. International aid for higher education followed a similar pattern. Foreign students were trained in the industrialized host country, while investments in universities were made to the hosted country. By the 1960s, bilateral recognition agreements were first established between institutions in different nations. It was also in the 1960s that issues of international mobility for engineers first emerged. In the mid-1980s, the U.S. National Research Council began making the case for a global engineering education. At the same time, closer cooperation developed between universities and the corporate sector. This was intended to be mutually beneficial to both parties and has had lasting effects on the mission of universities. More change came in the 1990s. Communism fell and many state-owned enterprises were privatized. Also, the European Union began taking strides to integrate its economy. The increased importance of Japan and the European Union drove an increased exchange of international education. As a result, multilateral agreements focused on the recognition of engineering qualifications. By the mid-90s, a series of reports emerged that called for reform in engineering education. They said that new engineers should be prepared for a broad range of careers, lifelong learning, increased teamwork, and to understand the social, economic, and the international context of their work. Professional engineering associations have also attempted to address issues of internationalism and standardization of engineering education. In 1946, building on the cooperation they had developed during the Second World War, members of Commonwealth engineering organizations held a conference. The result was the Commonwealth Engineers Council, an organization that now has 45 members and spans 5 continents. Despite this early start, the Council has done little to promote standardization among members other than hold conferences on topical issues. Between 1989 and 2002, the Washington, Sydney, and Dublin Accords were signed. These 3 international agreements cover mutual recognition of engineering qualifications and assist in international mobility. Each of the signatories is committed to the development and recognition of good engineering practices. The Washington Accord deals with professional engineering, the Sydney Accord deals with engineering technology, and the Dublin Accord concerns technician engineering. About 13 countries around the world have signed these accords. In 1995, 13 APEC member countries reached an agreement on the need for facilitating the mobility of engineers between member states, creating a register of APEC engineers. This agreement uses substantial equivalence to gauge professional competence, where competence is measured against a standard agreed to by APEC members. Once competency is established, an engineer can put their name on the APEC register. Since 1997, the European Federation of National Engineering has been uniting national engineering associations from 31 European countries. It promotes the EURING designation as a guarantee of competency so that an engineer who has achieved this designation should be allowed to practice freely in any member country. The 1999 Bologna Accord began as a commitment by France, Italy, Germany, and the UK to harmonize their higher education standards with those of the US. The accord has since spread to 46 signatories across Europe and parts of Asia. It is, however, only a declaration of intent and does not carry the weight of law. The Engineers Mobility Forum came as a result of Washington Accord members exploring methods for establishing mutual recognition of engineers. With the participation of FIANI and the Japan Consulting Engineers Association, a framework for the establishment of an international standard for professional engineering was created. Similarly, the signatories of the Sydney Accord established the ETMF, an international system of recognition for engineering technologists. Although engineering qualification issues first arose in the early 20th century, it wasn't until the 1960s that the first bilateral agreements in international recognition of qualifications were enacted. Since the 1980s, these agreements have become increasingly multilateral, further promoting the mobility of qualified engineers. These agreements can be divided into two components: mutual recognition of accreditation and mobility forums concerned with assessing professional practice and registration of engineers across borders.